And I think there will come some new knowledge now. We have Ragnar Kruse here. He's the co-founder and managing director of AI Fund, and we have a communality. I think you are also from Hamburg, right? So you are also responsible for the AI Hamburg and co-founder of Transatlantic AI Exchange. And I'm really happy to welcome you today, Ragnar Kruse. A warm applause. Nice to see you. And as already said before the break, we will learn now something about how to internationalize and scale AI companies. Your stage.
Thank you very much. Hello, everybody. Actually, my takeaway is we need to collaborate to get faster AI adopted here in Europe, to actually being able to compete with US or China, even more probably China, when we look at the speed, how they kind of adapt. And one way to do it is, of course, work with AI companies. Question here in the audience, who is working at an AI startup or AI company? Just raise your hands. That's a lot. Great. You are the audience I would love to address here, and therefore very happy to have you in the audience. Okay, old-fashioned way. So thank you very much, and here attending. A little bit about myself. First, actually, you all have a smartphone. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. Just point your smartphone here at the QR code and connect, and I will send you the deck as a PDF. As you are the right audience, you will get some learnings out of that. There are some hidden slides which I also will provide you. Thank you. So, a little bit about my background. I am actually a Hamburger, but I moved in '96 to the US, and that is where we built up Intershop, one of the first e-commerce companies, together with my wife, who is sitting here in the first row, and one of the first IPOs at Neuer Market. But important is, we went to the US to actually build our business there, and from there, then we also internationalized. So a lot what I will talk here about is some of the things I experienced, and I did this kind of multiple times. And then after that, I actually joined a company which actually also was co-founded here by Hans Uskoreit, spin-off of the DFKI, which, no, I'm still there, thank you, which actually allowed me to understand what machine learning is able to do. And since then, actually, so over the last 20 years, then used AI more and more in my own company. So after that spin-off, where we actually created a solution to automatically answer emails, which actually reduced cost in call centers, we started in 2005 a new company in San Francisco, which was all about advertising. Actually, first it was about apps on smartphones, and to monetize this, we created one of the largest platforms to actually auction off placements in apps, and created one of the 8 largest marketplaces. So, and there we applied a lot of machine learning to optimize, and there are lots of learnings we had. We started in San Francisco, but we built out a lot of development here in Europe. Actually in Hamburg, first in Eastern Europe, but then in Hamburg. We had 260 employees. Out of this, 160 were in Hamburg, of which 110 were in development and product. And we recruited also globally. So just in Hamburg, we had like 30 different nationalities. Interesting is that only 15% of our business was in Europe. 65% was in the US. So it is the biggest market, and still is, and you will see in some of the slides where I make the point about where do we need to scale to. Yeah. So that, a little bit to my background. We sold the company in 2016, left 2019, and then actually, as we applied a lot of machine learning and a lot of AI for fraud detection, for price optimization, cost optimization, and so on, we created a lot in Hamburg and collaborated with some local companies, and we realized that AI is still, to a lot of companies, new. I always know the story, you know, since the 70s, machine learning was there, summers and winters and so on, what we heard. But it's kind of astounding how little machine learning and AI has applied in our economy, in businesses. So when I left, we started AI for Hamburg and a couple of other initiatives I will refer to in a moment. Next slide, please. Yeah, so a little bit some numbers to kind of show where we are, build it big, scaled, yeah, but mostly really did this internationally. Next slide, please. We created also a fund, so we invest in AI companies, in European AI companies. We always say late seed, yeah, and A and B, so ticket size 500,000 to 4 million. To make them big, and the ambition there is actually create some real European champions. And my personal aspiration is, of course, creating also billion-dollar companies. Yeah. So maybe one of you is that in the future. Next slide, please. With AI Hamburg, what we started in 2019, we created basically an organization where we brought in and activated the ecosystem. Because what we learned is there is a lot of talent, but we need to work together, and we need to learn from each other. So we have now an active community there with more than 700 members. We also created, together with Applied AI in Munich, AI for Germany, where we now have 9 initiatives together. And actually, next slide, please. We also just created an AI startup hub, which is 1 hub out of 4 in Germany. 1 is in Berlin, 1 is in Munich, 1 is in Darmstadt, and 1 is in Hamburg, where we put a consortium together to systematically actually help building AI startups. Yeah? And that is incubation, acceleration, and internalization of AI startups. Now, I always think not in projects, but in products. And I think this is key, what we need to understand. We need to think in products, and who is doing those products? Startups. So if we want to bring this technology to our economy, to make it more competitive and get more even with China or the US, we need to make sure that we help startups to productize and to scale their business, which allows us to faster get that technology into the market. For this, we have the hub, and we will work with all those hubs together, and you're all invited to participate. Here in Berlin, it's Kiez, and so we have those hubs, and we already start collaborating there. We just started this program actually in January. In Hamburg, we just have our first batch. In Hamburg, interesting, there are about 120 AI startups. In all Germany, there are somewhere between 600 and 700 AI companies. All Europe, there are about 4,000. Just giving you the kind of the perspective. Next slide, please. Yeah, so what I always like is looking also at the big picture. Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, so what's the big picture? Why is this so important? Because AI will help to accelerate our economies. And the impact is, and this is a study from PricewaterhouseCoopers, is on a global basis more than $15 trillion across different industries just on globally. Then when you break it down, it's plus 11% in Germany. But more interestingly is if you really look into the numbers. So for Germany, it means when you look at this time of the study, which was 2017, yeah, the GDP of Germany was about $3.7 trillion US. Yeah. If the impact is 11% during this decade, that's about $407, not really true, $407 billion $407 billion. Then when you look at China is supposed to be on like plus 26%, then I ask myself, why can't we do 26%? Yeah. If it would be 26%, it would be $1 trillion. It would be $1 trillion for the German GDP. That's huge. If you ask me, who pays for Corona, what we spent all there, or now on the war and extra energy and so on, who cares about if we get some subsidies on gasoline? Let's invest in this technology. Let's get smarter and get that to work. And then it's not just 400 billion, it's $1 trillion. And that should be our target. That helps. But for this, it needs collaboration. And this is huge. I've seen it in my own companies, and everyone who talks to me, I can give them examples how we've done it. Over the last 2.5 years, I've seen so many examples how AI can improve the efficiency, can not only reduce cost, it's actually, if you think about it, increasing the efficiency means we reduced waste of energy, of whatever what. So why don't we do it today? Here we have the numbers, and you can break it down by industry, by countries, by geos, by industries. We just need to do it. And I see some familiar faces here also in the audiences, where I know they have solutions which helped drive this. Efficiencies, increases on revenues, or look at healthcare. There was a panel earlier. I love the use cases. Do you know, if it's on women, breast cancer diagnostic, prostata, or the failure rate normally in healthcare is 30%. With AI, you're able to reduce it to less than 5%. What that means is important to your health, to everyone's health. We just need to do it. The technology is out there. Just in Hamburg, we have like 12, 14 healthcare companies who are all in this area. Yeah. So let's put it to work. Next slide, please. Jump a little bit. You can then, as I said, look at where do we have gains and where can we put AI really to work. Next slide. Need to also watch the clock as we lost a little bit. So also interesting is AI is a value driver also for companies. Look at this slide. 7 out of the 10 most valuable public company by market cap use AI as a major driver of their company. Yeah, actually, it shifted a little bit. There used to be also Alibaba and Tencent on there, which over the last year have, because of some regulation there, dropped in market cap. And NVIDIA just came up on the 10th place, I think, over the last couple of weeks. 7 companies, and AI is the major driver. Yeah. So it's obvious. We need to make sure we get it to work. Yeah. Next slide. Then when you look at technology, also there are enough predictions about there. In this case, deep learning will add $30 trillion to global equity market capitalization, to companies. Yeah. So if I would have a corporate audience here, I would ask them, how much are you investing in this kind of technology? You're an executive. You want to drive the value of your company, yeah? Drive shareholder value. Apply this technology. If you don't have a plan, you better get a plan. And I can, and we can tell you people who help you to do so. Yeah? And compared to like 5 or 7 years ago when we did a lot at my last company with AI, we didn't find the talent. But in every city, major city here in Germany, probably also in Europe, for Germany I know, there are enough service companies who provide services who help you to apply. Just reach out and work together with them. Next slide. A lot of detail. So as I said, better look at the deck, which I sent to you when you connect to me. What's interesting is really we have enough talent, we have enough research, we just need to get it to work. But the value driver you probably get in the US market, because when you look at on the commercial side, the US market is number one. It's overall number one, But specifically when it comes to also commercialization of AI, it's the most important market. Next slide. I know, Hans, you were showing those slides also earlier, very similar. When you look at investment in AI, the US market is the biggest market over the last years investing in AI by private investments. And then look at this here, 2 billion, and Hans, you were saying this, what was it, 3 billion, what we plan to do, and then plus 2 million from our Chancellor Angela Merkel, and they spent 300 million. They probably are happy that they saved money. What's a mess? Am I in the wrong stage? We should invest, and look for ROI. There is enough talent and a lot who were raised. You can show how to produce this kind of ROI. We need to invest more, and very clearly that is what governments need to understand, but also companies need to understand. Next slide, please. This is now breakdown even by countries. Again, it's in the US. Where did we have those companies who have the highest value? US. So we have the chance in Germany and Europe to do the same. We need to collaborate, we need to know where to go and get it not in projects or POCs, but in products and get it to market. Next slide. So therefore, if you ask me, if we talk, and that's how do we scale and how do we internationalize, I don't talk about going to 40 different countries. I talk about we need to internationalize into the US. As a startup. It's the biggest market. I gave you all the numbers. That is what we need to think about. Next slide, please. So I've looked probably at about 160 different AI startups. And they all have certain things in common. We're really good on research. There's a lot of funding you're able to get. So very often they have already matured, but what I realize is they stick around in their local markets way too long. And then there are certain markets which are really tricky. So I, as a German consumer or even business, I'm very critical. So if I look into any kind of solution, I look at 5 competitors, and I probably, as my requirement, I want to have all the features of 3 of them. And of course, nobody's fitting to this, so I don't make a decision, it takes longer. German market always take longer. So there are a lot of startups who already have a good solution, but then they stick around too long in a local market, while in the US, there are companies start with ideas, there's AI all over their presentation, probably no AI in, but they have a product and go to market with that. And so what happens? The US counterparts, larger market, faster adoption, get bigger, and then they internationalize and take over. But what happens for those European companies? They get sidelined by those US companies, they get acquired by those US companies, or fail, or just go sideways. Not necessary. Next slide, please. So, therefore, clearly, think about going global. Sorry, go US. US is the largest market in the Western world, and has huge opportunities there in different verticals. It's a very diversified market, and also there's much more capital available. While we have really a loophole here, specifically on early investment, it's a huge VC market. And it's also a very large capital market. Now also with specs where they create some kind of companies who acquire other companies to build larger companies, we're still behind. So that's the opportunity. That's something we need to face. So if you're a startup and you think about internationalizing, don't think about going from Germany to UK or Italy or whatever. It's opportunistic. Have a good strategy in place, and then better go US. That's clearly the point I want to make, and if you take anything from this presentation, then that. Go US, but you need to be prepared. Next slide, please. So we are with our hub working on a blueprint. How do we help startups to actually build their business and also accelerate this? And part of that is, of course, is internationalization. I think what we need to do is we need to look at what's happening in the US and why is it happening and how is it happening. And we also need to look at China, by the way, what they are doing, but that's much more even government driven. What I, in that case, really would love to see here too, but that's a different story. What we can learn from Silicon Valley is that their companies look in, not in POCs, they think in products. And there are different ways to kind of do it. Ideation. Come up with ideas, throw it at each other, and do multiple kind of iterations so that you actually are able to get a product together. Yeah? And I know I've seen a lot of service providers who sometimes come up with a product idea. It's good, but think in products. Yeah? What is is there a pain point? How do you solve it? Is it replicable? And so on. Come up with an idea. Then, when you have an idea, and those are the techniques what is happening in the Valley, is you come up with an MVP. By the way, you don't need to have a product at all. Just put some literature together, have a website, yeah, and then kind of reach out and get the feedback. Based on the feedback, you are able to more and more work on your product market fit to get a product really ready, which really fits to some customers. Don't work on a product for like a year before you actually test it with any kind of customer. Get faster feedback, do multiple iterations, and think in this. That's Silicon Valley, yeah. And then when you have tested this and have a certain product market fit, then actually you can think about go-to-market, yeah. And then you build your infrastructure and so forth. Yeah. So. And there's a whole playbook kind of behind it, how you then scale a business. Yeah? Too much to cover in the last 5 minutes, yeah? But there are systematics behind it. We have here in Hamburg, we have in several hubs who work with you to help you to do so, how we can scale it. Then the other part is from Silicon Valley. When companies are successful, they sell, they go IPO, they have stock option plans where basically not just the founders, but also their employees participate. What happens is you create wealth, yeah? And then start again, and start together with some others, and you have now your first funding to do another company. Yeah? And as more you do this, as better you will get on this. By the way, failing is not a problem, it's a learning, yeah? See it as that, and that's also something we need to learn, specifically in Germany. Failing is you have tried. If you never try, you can never be successful. So those are learnings really from Silicon Valley where we need to adopt, and it's not so difficult. By the way, as part of what we do with our hubs is also go into universities and tell the students that it can be really advantageous to do a startup. Yeah, think about it and do it early enough. And while you're at the university, also think about how you might team up, come up with some ideas and so on. And if you want to give it a try, start working as a working student for one of those startups so you get the feeling for it. Yeah? And you know, it's sometimes I hear life-work balance. Yeah? No. First work. Learn to work and learn what it takes to actually run a startup, have an idea, and having all kind of problems to go through. But what really has changed, I can say, is today you basically are able to do a global business. What we couldn't do 20 years ago, but what we can do now, because we are all much more connected. Smartphones are the best example. We've been doing business on smartphones for the last 15 years. Direct to consumers to more than 3 billion consumers worldwide. Anyways, next slide, please. So one of the important things about going international, and these are just the headlines, watching the clock, there's much more there. Before you go international, you need to be prepared, yeah, meaning is first have a market fit for your local market. Yeah. So just with an idea, market fit, that is important. We always, oh shoot, I'm sorry. I turned it off. Sorry. That was for my afternoon tea. So have a product, have revenues, have customers, then you're ready to also think about really international. Yeah? And it's important to have really a plan. You just don't do it because someone comes from the US and wants to do business. Develop really a plan. Ideally, as an AI startup, have a SaaS business model. Yeah? Have a good business and financial plan. Have your playbook together, yeah? And have investors who support it. And very important is you can prepare, which also means is you need to think about multilingual. With speaking everything in German as a German startup doesn't bring you anywhere because you're not prepared to do an international business. Speak English. Makes it easier for talent, makes it easier for any internalization, but do it early on. Oh, contracts and so on, do it also in English. Makes it easier for international investors. Yeah. And the great opportunity is, we've been in advertising now for 15 years, digital advertising, automated sales. There are so many tools you can use and leverage to actually then do customer acquisition and automate it. You just need to learn, be KPI driven, look at conversion, do A/B testing and do this constantly and over. You find your way to actually scale your business, not only in your own country, but also in other countries. Then, payment. Yeah. Do you know that in the US still a lot of companies pay by check? Yeah. Easy to solve. There are banks who actually have check drop boxes, which means customers send a check to that mailbox, and they automatically put it and deposit it in your account. You need to know this. Yeah. Handling credit cards. Yeah. It's not everyone wires money specifically in the US. So that those kind of things, you just need to be prepared before you do anything like that. Yeah. And when dedicate budget for expansion. By the way, everything might take twice as long as you think. Yeah, so it's good to always make predictions and plans, but then also see how you're off and on your plan, because it helps you for the future to adjust your plan. If you think it takes 6 months, it probably might take 12 months. Same with budget. Then building international business and US, it means really founder and executive commitment to that, which also includes travel. So East or West Coast. West Coast always 9 hours time difference, makes it difficult with your European team to communicate, but it depends on also in industries. I love Valley, yeah, but some love New York City, and of course if you're younger you probably might love the nightlife around this, because there are of course also things besides business, yeah, but Valley is fun too, I can tell you, and you learn a lot there. Then, I mentioned already corporate language English. That is to actually get you ready. There are different mentalities, what also needs to be understood. Yeah, now, luckily, I'm not talking about Arabic countries or China, but US, much easier. Western culture is there much closer. Yeah, and also recommendation. There are accelerators which can help you. I talked about the local AI hubs. There's also an organization which is German Accelerator. They have a program. It's also funded by the government to help you systematically prepare you to go international, and even they have entry programs to go into the US and even other countries. Again, my recommendation is go US. Yeah, that's all so far. So connect with me on LinkedIn. Happy to provide you with a deck. There's a little bit more information on there. I see I'm 2 minutes over my time, but I'm very happy that you're here. Hopefully see you on the next conference, and happy to connect to you after the show. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ragnar. I was just thinking about a quote Elon Musk posted because after he just bought Twitter, he said, and that was a joke, he want to buy Germany now to digitalize Germany, and I think it's a good quote, and for me it's not so far-fetched. But maybe one question, I think we are a bit over the time, but one question to you. Why do you think we are so slow when I see China and US? What is it? Is it that we are so stuck in bureaucracy, or are we stuck in fear? What is maybe in one sentence now, what do you think, where are we stuck in Germany?
First of all, China is much more first government-driven,
yes.
And they're really good on execution, and then also the economy follows. In the US, it's entrepreneurship, Okay. And when you look at Silicon Valley has driven a lot of the kind of culture there, and the spread on wealth through startups. It's much more startup oriented. When you look at here in Germany, we have 700 AI startups. In Israel, which is a tenth of the population, they have 1,200 AI startups.
Yeah.
So we need to learn doing startups. That's important. Startups are the speedboats of innovation. And that's the reason. That's something we need to understand. I already dream about it. So if someone would wake me up and say, "Oh, startups are the speedboats of innovation," that's something we should understand. On all levels.
We should swap ideas later when we are both in Hamburg, and
Happy to do so.
Yeah, let's connect. Thank you.
You're very welcome.